Welcome to Still Speak Podcast. This is episode 3 of the family Dynasty murder mystery involving the Murdaugh family out of Hampton County, South Carolina. If you've not seen the first few episodes, go take a listen. And for the rest, we're just going to get right back in it. In the last episode, we went back to 2015 when Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old, was found dead in the middle of a road. We went into some of the case files on Stephen Smith that the South Carolina Highway Patrol uncovered during their investigation. I told you that the Murdaugh name was mentioned 40 times in the case files, and much of it was tipped based off rumors, and it was mostly about Buster Murdaugh, who was, the one being mentioned, and that is Paul Murdaugh's brother. There were also several people in the case files that linked back to the Murdaugh family, their law firm, or the 14th Judicial Court that much of the Murdaugh family has served at as solicitors. Now, Stephen's case was never solved, but recently SLED had been handling the double homicide of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, and now also the shooting of Alex Murdaugh on the side of a road last weekend. Well, SLED, which reminder stands for South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, reopened Stephen's case after information was uncovered during the investigation into Paul and Maggie's murder. Now, there's not much information out there that I can find about the death of the Murdaugh family housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, in 2018 that was ruled an accident by slip and fall, but Alex Murdaugh paid out $500,000 in a wrongful death suit because it happened on his property. So because I can't find much more on that, we're going to move on to the death of Mallory Beach, who was also 19 years old at the time of her death, and she died in the boating accident of which Paul Murdaugh, the son of Alex Murdaugh, had been criminally charged for. And despite that, Mallory Beach's family put out a statement the day after Paul and his mother Maggie had been murdered. Quote, "The Beach family extends its deepest and warmest sympathies to the Murdaugh family during this terrible time. Having suffered the devastating loss of their own daughter, the family prays that the Murdaughs can find some level of peace from this tragic loss. They would like the family and the community to know that their thoughts and continued prayers are with the Murdaughs. It's their most sincere hope that someone will come forward and cooperate with authorities so that the perpetrator of these senseless crimes can be brought to justice." Unquote. Now, this is seriously intriguing since so many believe that the deaths of Paul and Maggie was karma, and people believe that it's payback from one of the people who have died that the Murdaugh name has been connected to, and one of those families is the Beach family. Mallory Beach's funeral was held at Open Arms Fellowship Church in Hampton, South Carolina, and it was completely packed out. Speakers delivered tributes to Mallory and guiding people to lean on their faith during this tough time. One speaker said, quote, "She went early, she went young, but she went full of life, embracing. She loved her family, her friends, and her shelter pets." Unquote. Those who knew her described her as sweet and kind and caring young woman. Another speaker said, quote, "You can tell by the stories that have been shared and memories that have been shared that she enjoyed doing what we call life. She was a lover of animals, family, and God." Unquote. Pastor James Porter said, quote, "Many of us on the outside looking in would say, what a disaster. But God said, no, I got a plan for peace. And I know that today there's mourning in the room and sorrow and that feeling of loss. But I'll tell you today that Mallory is not feeling lost today. She is celebrating in Jesus' arms. She didn't have to worry about the accident, the water, the elements, because in that moment she was escorted into the throne of Jesus." Unquote. Now, yes, I just clapped. Let's walk through the night that Mallory Beach was tragically killed. Buckle up, folks. Okay. These are the names of the people who rode on the boat that deadly night. Paul Murdaugh, Morgan Doughty, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's Doughty. Maybe it's Doughty. Connor Cook, Miley Altman, Anthony Cook, and Mallory Beach, of course. And the group met at the Murdaugh's home around 6:30 p.m. on the 23rd of February to go to an oyster roast at the home of Crystal Cook. And they arrived by boat, which the boat was a 2006 Sea Hunt Triton 172 that was owned by Alex Murdaugh. And they arrived at the home between 7:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. According to a statement from Crystal Cook, no alcohol was served at the event, and she said that when the kids arrived, Miley Altman had a White Claw in her hand, but she threw it away because her parents were at the dinner. Now, I will note that the Beach family included the Cooks in their lawsuit and claimed alcohol was served to the boat occupants. Crystal Cook's maintains that the kids did not seem intoxicated while there and did not drink, and they left at 11:30. But the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, so SDNR, shared data from the boat's Garmin tracking device that had them leaving the oyster roast at 12:11 a.m. So now this is into February 24th. I want to note here that means driving the boat, very late at night, and this boat had no working forward lights, only running lights. And it was disclosed in the dispatch calls that it was very foggy out, and the weather, according to the occupants of the boat, said that it was in the 40s, the weather. And a boat occupant held up a flashlight to guide their way. So obviously this is very dangerous. You have no running forward lights, you're using a flashlight, it's foggy out, it's cold out, it's late at night, etc. And this makes me wonder how far from the Cook home the boat was, because did no one at the party notice, when they arrived or when they left, that they had no working forward light? And I also wonder if at this point it was foggy out, or did the fog come a little bit later when they crashed? So the group of friends then leave there, so 12:11 a.m., and they set out for bars along the Beaufort waterfront after the oyster roast. And their first stop was 38 minutes later after leaving the oyster roast. And the first stop was at Henry Chambers Waterfront Park, and they arrived at 12:49 a.m. The Garmin tracker recorded the boat almost colliding with the Woods Swing Bridge at one point during this time. Surveillance camera captured Paul Murdaugh and Connor Cook entering Luther's Rare and Well Done bar, and the timestamp was 12:55 a.m. Paul ordered the first round of Jaeger bombs at 12:59 a.m. Connor ordered a round of lemon drop shots shortly after that, and the boys left at 1:07 a.m. That is 2 shots each in 8 minutes. Paul and Connor met back up with the rest of the group at 1:13 a.m., so it took them about 6 minutes to get back to the boat, and they left for home at 1:17 a.m. Now, almost an hour later, at 2:20 a.m., the Garmin recorded a decrease, then a spike in the speed of the boat. According to the occupants, when the boat decreased is when Paul moved to the front of the boat to argue with his girlfriend, Morgan. He then returned to the helm of the boat, and the boat picked up speed. Seconds after the boat picked up speed and it plowed into dolphin pilings at the Archer Creek Bridge at 2:21 a.m., the boat came to a stop when it crashed under the bridge. Okay, so there's a little discrepancy here, because if the boat decreased and it was because, he went to go argue with Morgan at the front of the boat, how did he get back to the helm so quickly to slam on the accelerator and crash in under a minute? That's fascinating. So let's keep that in mind. But anyways, it was later said the front left side, so the driver's side, was split open from the nose all the way to the back, and there was a 6-foot gash where the boat came apart at the seams. SCDNR officers said in an interview that passenger Miley Altman said that Paul, Anthony, and Mallory were thrown from the boat. Paul and Anthony made it to shore. Mallory, unfortunately, did not. Anthony was Mallory's boyfriend. So Mallory and him, in addition to Paul, were thrown. And Miley said, quote, Mallory was just like nowhere to be seen. It was like she just disappeared. Anthony was screaming in the water for Mallory, and that's when I knew something bad had happened, unquote. Miley said that it took a minute for them to catch their breath, and then they called 911. Connor Cook, who's Anthony Cook's cousin, stayed on the line with the operator trying to get as much information as possible to the first responders. Connor and Miley at one point walked to the road and flagged down officers with a light, and it sounded like it was the same flashlight that they used to guide their way on the boat. Morgan was injured in the crash, and she can be heard in the background of the call panicking about losing blood. Miley claims that Paul's main concern was getting in contact with his grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh. When investigators asked Miley why Paul was so adamant about calling his grandfather, she speculated, well, you know, 'cause they're lawyers and stuff. Miley, Connor, and Paul rode together in one ambulance, and Miley claims that Paul was being uncooperative and aggressive towards first responders during the ride. Now, considering he had been drinking, I mean, some people do tend to get aggressive, so this doesn't in the least bit shock me, that he would be combative after a night of drinking. Paul was met by his father, Alex, and grandfather, Randolph, at the hospital. And a nurse later recalled that Alex was walking around introducing himself to the EMS and ER staff, and, he was trying to talk to all the patients involved. They're saying this to kind of make it seem like he was trying to take control of the narrative kind of way. But I mean, he's a lawyer, despite the accident involving his son, going around trying to get information and seeing if everyone was okay is actually not totally bizarre in that context. He knew likely in his lawyer mind that this may result in some form of lawsuits, and he may have been preparing for that. It doesn't necessarily mean he was attempting to control the narrative or was trying to get Paul out of this, mess. Although it could be why. But, the context here is they're lawyers and solicitors. They know how this stuff works. And another nurse that took care of Morgan claims that Alex even tried to enter her room. It was obvious that Paul was drunk, but no responding officers administered a field sobriety test at the actual scene of the crash. Instead, the group was transported to the hospital, where he was tested at the hospital for his BAC, and that is blood alcohol content, for those who don't know. And by the first time the first DNR officer arrived on scene, an officer named Pritchard, all occupants of the boat, except for Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, had been transported to Beaufort Memorial Hospital, is what a spokesperson said. So they were basically saying that when the officer arrived, there was no time for, a field sobriety test because most of the occupants were already at the hospital, okay? This is their explanation as to why that wasn't done on scene. After interviewing Anthony Cook at the crash site, Pritchard visited the other passengers at the hospital, where he said he found Paul visibly intoxicated and slurring his speech, and there was a security guard outside the room, and that Paul had been strapped to his a gurney because he had been acting out of control. With his dad and grandfather present, Paul invoked his right to remain silent and did not give Pritchard an official statement. Now, this isn't shocking either. Again, the father and grandfather know how to handle these types of situations. And there are claims the officer did not ask Paul to submit to a field sobriety test at the hospital, but that he did request one from another passenger, Connor Cook, and Connor declined, according to court documents. Connor had a broken jaw after the crash. Now, in defense of the officer, if Paul was acting out of control and was strapped to a gurney, and he already said no to a statement, this can explain why he may not even have bothered asking him to do a field sobriety test. And I mean, really, a field sobriety test is supposed to be done at the site, and it wasn't, so at that point, does it really matter? And some time had passed as well. And since it was not immediately clear who had been driving, he had to rely on the words of people who clearly had been drinking. So my whole thing is, why not ask all the passengers to take one? Why was it one or two? Why wasn't all of them tested or asked to take it? We later see that there was a cooler full of alcohol, beer on the boat, in addition to the stops that they made along their route to the local bars. Now, Paul's BAC was tested at the hospital regardless, and it was 0.286, more than an hour after the crash, and legal limit is 0.08. So this is 3 times the legal limit, and we have to keep in mind that Paul was underage. Once Mallory's body had been found a week later, it was determined that her BAC was 0.155 at the time of her death. In an attempt to get information originally from Paul, Pritchard asked if he had been driving, and Paul said that he was not driving. And he also said, "Why do you need to know who was driving? This isn't going to help find Mallory." And according to Pritchard's original report, he also said, "What if it was me driving the boat?" And then at that point, Alex and Randolph came in the room and told him to not say anything else. Pritchard said, "I'm talking to Paul," and they said, "No, you're not. You're talking to us now." And this is what Pritchard disclosed in his deposition. Again, I mean, I'm not trying to defend these people, but this makes sense to me. I mean, because of their background. I mean, quite honestly, many suspects, if not all, should keep their mouths shut. And, lawyer Paul is just lucky that he had a family who was in law. So, many don't have that, and many can't afford that. He happened to have them in the family, so he got lucky. So I understand this telling him not to speak. This isn't sketchy to me in any way. Connor Cook later claimed that Alex Murdaugh told him to lie about who was driving the boat. Again, this could be that Alex was trying to help him out as well. I mean, again, he's a lawyer, so he knows how these things go, and this was his, son's friend. I mean, maybe he was looking out for him. I'm just saying, it's a possibility, right? If it's true that he even said this, we don't know. This is the word of Connor. And Alex also recommended a lawyer friend to Connor Cook, and we talked about this lawyer in the last episode. His name is Corey Fleming. A case later brought by Connor Cook alleges there was a conspiracy to misdirect the criminal investigation away from Paul and to wrongly shift the focus to him. And during a January 13th, 2020 deposition, Connor claims that despite initially telling law enforcement he did not remember who was driving the boat at the time of the crash, he did know who was driving. He says it was Paul Murdaugh. Cook said that while at the hospital, Alex Murdaugh stopped him in the hallway and told him that everything was going to be all right. He just needed to keep his mouth shut and tell them he didn't know who was driving. When asked why he was scared to tell the truth, Cook said, quote, "Well, I was told not to, and being who they are, I was doing what I was told," unquote. The investigator asked Cook if he had any other reason to be concerned about the Murdaughs, and Connor cited two alleged instances, quote, "One was said that Paul had pushed his housekeeper down the stairs and she died and nothing ever happened. And another one, there was something that Paul was supposedly involved with a guy who got beat up in the middle of the road that they got out of." Okay, well, I mean, the maid's death was ruled an accident, okay? And Alex did pay $500,000 for that, but I haven't seen anybody else make this claim that Paul pushed this housekeeper down the stairs. I think if that was the case, just like the boating accident, he would have been charged, but I get what he's going with this. He's saying that the family name got him out of this. I don't know if this is true, if this is rumor, because much of the Murdaughs that were named in the Stephen Smith case file, much of it was based on rumors and not too kind of like town gossip type of thing. As far as Stephen, it was actually Buster Murdaugh that was mentioned in Stephen's case as a possible suspect. But Cook went on to say, quote, "Just anything they get in, they get out of," unquote. Now, no offense to Connor, but I have to wonder if this was just his lawyers, if they're the ones that came up with this as a reason, why he didn't tell the truth at first. I mean, come on. He didn't have to listen, even if he was fearful of them, but it sounds more like he was fearful of them getting away with it, since he said, just anything they get in, they get out of. Stephen's death was based on rumors, and the housekeeper thing, we have no idea, like I just said, but if he was fearful of them getting away with it, then that's even more reason to tell who is driving. If he was fearful of them doing something to him, then why was he no longer fearful enough to come forth and say this information at a later date? Furthermore, his cousin was dating Mallory Beach, and people typically back their family above all else. I would have liked to hear more from Connor, because this alone doesn't sit well personally with me, but I definitely would need more information. But moving on. Connor did use the lawyer that Alex Murdaugh recommended, but he later dropped him. Cook said he decided to come forward when it seemed the blame was being shifted to him for the crash. Okay, so the only time that he felt the need to come forth with this information is when he felt the attention was turning his way. But in all honesty, this secret that he kept makes me question who was really driving that night. Why come forth for yourself, but not to defend your friend Mallory, your cousin's girlfriend, to get justice from the start for Mallory? The question of who was responsible for the crash might have been put to rest with the Murdaugh's criminal trial, but Paul's dead, and the charges were dropped after his death. So now it's the lingering of who was driving. During depositions, Morgan Dowdy described Paul as an angry drunk who thought he was invincible. Minus Paul and obviously Mallory, the rest testified that they were all arguing on the boat about who would drive just prior to the crash. Anthony, Mallory's boyfriend, suggested an Uber, it has been claimed. But Paul, they said, who had a drunken alter ego named Timmy, insisted that they would travel by boat despite the fog and lack of light on the boat. Now, this Timmy thing brought me back to my young days, as we had several friends whose entire personalities would change when they were drinking, and one we even did give an alter ego name to. I'm not going to tell you his name, but when he was acting a fool when drinking, we would call him disgruntled, and then his last name, which again, I'm not going to tell you what his last name is, but that's what we called him. So this brought back memories, this idea of the alter ego Timmy. So it was said that, everyone had been fighting and arguing. They even drifted in circles numerous times and idled along. Miley was steadily hollering she was ready to get home because she had work the next morning. Anthony Cook said at some point he claims that Paul was acting like he was on drugs and started to take off his clothes during the arguing in 40-degree weather. Paul stripped down to his boxers, and Anthony claimed he would not let anyone else drive. He also claimed that he slapped, pushed, and spat on his girlfriend, Morgan, just prior to the increase in speed when Paul returned to the driver's spot. Here's a question. Why did no one take over the boat if they were so concerned when Paul left the driver's side and went to the front to argue with Morgan? Why? Why at this point did no one say, F him, and grab the steering wheel and take control of the boat? I mean, it was said that there was all this arguing happening over who was going to drive the boat. Doesn't make sense. But Morgan recounted how she had yelled at him, and he told her to shut the F up and sit the F down. No one else was going to be driving. So this is concerning to me, okay? I'm imagining, because I was young myself and did stupid, dumb things when I was younger, that I survived, thank the Lord. But I'm imagining these 6 young kids. I'm going to call them kids because, they were 19, 20, 18. I don't know the exact ages at the time. They're drunk. Some of them wasted in a boat at night with no forward lights, in this fog, using a flashlight. Like, just imagine this scene, okay? And they're arguing and fussing and bickering and all that other stuff, right, about who's going to drive. I'm not going to bash these kids because we've all said and done, like I said, really stupid things at this age. At least most of us have. But context here is these kids really had no business doing what they were doing. Obviously, they were underage. And I'm going to say that all are at fault for getting on a boat in these circumstances, in my opinion. Yes, they were young, but they were also adults. All, I am sure, had cell phones. And at any time along their route, when they stopped at all these places and they felt uncomfortable or unsafe, they simply had to walk away and call an Uber. They didn't need to listen to Paul or get on the boat. I mean, come on. Let's be real here. Let's not tiptoe around this and push it all on Paul. We can't let them all off the hook and point solely at Paul. They had a choice that night, and they got on the boat. Okay? It gets worse because of their intoxicated state. When the boat increased speed, Anthony said that the front of the boat came up out of the water. Now, if you've ever been on a boat and it picks up speed a little bit, you probably know what that, he's referring to. And he decided to walk to the back of the boat at the stern, and Mallory sat on his lap. Now, if they had not been drinking, the thought process would have been to move to the front of the boat to add weight to that area that was coming up out of the water rather than adding weight to the back of the boat. If they had not been intoxicated, Mallory would not have thought to sit on Anthony's lap and instead sit in a seat and hold on until they can calm Paul down. This is the perfect storm of what sent Mallory, Anthony, and Paul flying out of the boat and killing one of them. Here's another issue. They said that they believed Paul was driving because he was behind the wheel, and we all know that you need to steer and, accelerate. Just because he was behind the wheel doesn't mean it was him who accelerated the boat. Connor Cook was in the middle console next to Paul. You know, if they're all arguing and tension is rising and people are getting frustrated and aggravated with Paul and it's all this bickering and craziness going on at one time, anyone on that boat could have easily attempted to take control from Paul and slammed on the accelerator in an attempt to take control. I mean, imagine this entire scene as a whole. Further, once the accelerator was hit, did no one push Paul out of the way, hit him, grab the wheel, anything of the sort to gain control from him? If he's the one that accelerated, did no one react to stop him? Yeah, they probably didn't because they were all drinking. Anthony said when the boat in the front came up, he went to the back, like I said. So why not push Paul instead out of the way and take control of the boat instead of doing that? It sounds like, none of them on this boat were thinking clearly enough to, find a way to avoid what ultimately happened. Now, I'm not excusing or defending Paul in any way. He may very well have been acting like a total imbecile in his boxers, wasted, pissed off, and hit that accelerator in a fit of anger after harming his girlfriend, which is completely inexcusable. I'm just saying that there's a lot that could have been done differently and handled differently, and it wasn't. And one of the biggest reasons why it wasn't was because most, if not everyone, was wasted. And they also testified about this alter ego, and if they're aware of this alter ego, then why would you go drinking and climb in a boat in fog with no forward lights using a flashlight? I mean, goodness. This is a cautionary tale for all young adults. If you have a teenager, a young adult, share the story with them, okay? Let it be a warning to them. Now, of course, kids never listen. None of us did. But you can at least attempt to share and hope that they learn and listen from this story. Another point here is what happened with the flashlight before or after someone slammed on the accelerator? Meaning, was it still being used? Or did the person holding the flashlight lose control of the flashlight? Or did they turn the flashlight off intentionally because they didn't want Paul driving and they wanted to piss him off? Kind of like, okay, well, if you want to drive, well, I'm not going to put the light on for you. To kind of like piss him off and not put the light on, because if he accelerated that boat with no light on to see where he was going, then that could have contributed to the crash. Now, I think it was said that Connor was holding the flashlight, which is why he was in the center console area. I want to point out, the driver's side was the side that was all torn up. And if you look at the boat, the driver's side had a seat right behind it. And it was enough room for two people. He was ejected, but Connor was not ejected. And I would think that if Paul had been between this small area between the seat and the steering wheel, that would have actually stopped him from being ejected, even if it was the driver's side that got the most damage. And if you look at one of the pics on the screen that I'll put in this video, you will see that Mallory and Anthony were in the back of the boat to the right. And, excuse me, I just moved my table here. And Mallory, they said that at first when they started hitting the pilings, that Anthony said that him and Mallory fell to the bottom of the boat first before being ejected. It's just really odd in the way in which it unfolded. Albeit, though, they were traveling at 30 miles per hour before hitting pilings at 21 miles per hour, before the boat slowed down to 10 to 15 miles per hour before landing, or aka crashing, onto the bank. At what points were these three individuals thrown from the boat? Who went flying first, then second, then third? And at what points during the crash did this occur? We don't know. In dash cam footage, it shows at least one of the 6 indicated it was Murdaugh, who was the pilot of the boat. You can hear one saying, and I'm not going to say the full word, but one said, quote, "That mother effer needs to rot in prison," unquote. Apparently speaking about Paul, and he also said, quote, "He ain't gonna get in no effing trouble," unquote. The passenger who said Paul was driving was Anthony Cook. He said he grabbed his girlfriend and got to the back of the boat and Paul was driving. He was directly asked, "Paul?" And he said, "Yes, sir." He later noted that his cousin was next to Paul, but Paul had his hands on the steering wheel. However, the SCDNR officer noted Anthony did not know who was driving and thought that it could be Connor or Paul. Now, it could be because he mentioned his cousin was next to Paul and in the center console, and in addition, the officer thought or knew Anthony had been drinking, so assumed that Anthony couldn't know for sure who was driving, so he wrote it as such. I mean, that's possible. Also, he should have said that Anthony did say it was Paul that was driving, but it is unclear since Connor was next to him. In another video released by the sheriff's office, Anthony emotionally indicated several times that Paul was driving, and he begged to take over because Paul was so intoxicated. Anthony even was yelling in the footage taken at the scene, saying, quote, get this mother effer right there away from me," while Anthony had been on the phone with his mother, telling his mother that they couldn't find Mallory. Anthony got increasingly agitated and was told to calm down, and at one point, apparently or allegedly, Paul smiled at Anthony and Anthony went off saying, quote, "You are effing smiling like this is effing funny. My effing girlfriend is gone, bro. You think this is effing funny," unquote. The responding officer was trying to defuse the situation and told Anthony to sit down, to which Anthony said, quote, "Paul needed to rot in effing hell," unquote. This officer was the only one to make a note that Anthony said Paul Murdaugh was driving. And a SDNR officer noted that Anthony did flip out on Paul, but he did not note that Anthony said Paul was driving or that he said, quote, "He killed my girlfriend," unquote. Morgan, this is Paul's girlfriend, and Miley both said they knew Paul was using his brother's ID for that night. They noted that he did not look like his brother because Buster has a fatter face. Miley said, the weight on ID was in the 200 pounds area, but that clearly Paul was much smaller. Now, in defense of the bars and the convenience store, I mean, people do lose weight, right? But also, when they check IDs, especially when they check so many IDs a day, they tend to just focus on the date and the pic, right? Nothing more than that. So whether that's wrong or right, it happens. They likely just assume that he lost weight, but you know what they say about assuming. So there's that. Miley admitted to also buying alcohol that day with a fake ID. The teens all or most of them, continued to drink at the party, which conflicts with Crystal Cook saying they did not. It is possible, that they were drinking off to the side without anyone knowing, but I don't know. I mean, we don't know. It's possible. Crystal has to self-preservation as well. You know what I'm saying? If that's what the kids are saying. They're saying they did drink there. I mean, were they going back and forth to the boat to get their beer that was on the boat in the cooler? Were they sneaking drinks at the party and staying off to the side where there's a lot of people there so nobody actually noticed that they were drinking, or Crystal never noticed that they were drinking? Nobody knows. But this is conflicting, obviously. It was also said that Paul left the steering wheel numerous times on their journey and that Connor was left to take the wheels those times. Morgan said that Mallory was scared after Paul yelled at her after bringing up the possibility of leaving the boat behind or letting someone else drive. Anthony yelled back at him, but it went no further than that. No one who was on the boat can say for sure that Paul hit the throttle, but each believed that it was Paul. One said they could not say for 100% sure, but they imagined that it was Paul. Another one said, I have gone over this in my head many times, and the only thing I could think of is that Paul is an angry drunk who thinks he's invisible, so when angry, I just feel like he put it in full motion. Now, it should be noted in relation to Paul and Maggie's deaths, the 4 remaining passengers all provided DNA samples to investigators after it was revealed that prior to Paul's murder, that he had been receiving death threats. Mallory Beach's family also submitted DNA. They all did so voluntarily and all spoke with investigators. Investigators also obtained digital and cell phone records of all their movements on the day of the murders. So, I don't know. This boat crash is really interesting. I don't know. I don't know what to believe. I think this was a case of 6 kids who set out for a night of fun. Alcohol was consumed when it shouldn't have been. Arguments ensued. Fighting ensued. And just pure chaos was probably going on the boat. A lot of arguing and yelling and hollering, what have you. And this was just a perfect storm that ended in someone's death. It's really hard to tell who was driving. But let's do a little update on Alex Murdaugh. And let's talk about what was disclosed on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. A reporter named Matt Harris said Maggie Murdaugh, wife of Alex, mother of Paul, had actually ordered a forensic accountant as well, just like the law office did. And he said he found this out from a very reliable source. Now, I personally am not a huge fan of sources or the information, but what I do is I take it, I put it in the back of my mind, I hold on to it, I speculate with it, but then I, of course, wait until that information gets confirmed. This could be true, and it is possible. I mean, maybe there was a divorce on the horizon, and maybe she was trying to see what was happening with their money, or to look at their assets, or possibly suspected that he had an addiction, or he, knew that he did, and she wanted to see how much was being spent on this addiction. It could be for so many reasons, so it's believable. We just don't have that information just yet. And then further, it was uncovered that Alex Murdaugh was denied the claim against his $6 million insurance policy to cover the wrongful death lawsuit against him for the death of Mallory Beach in the boating accident. And he could possibly be on the hook for millions of dollars to the family of Mallory Beach. The insurance stated that it had no obligation to insure Murdaugh when he had knowledge, or should have had knowledge, that his minor son was illegally purchasing and consuming alcohol on a regular basis by using or displaying the driver's license of his adult son, Buster Murdaugh. Although the ongoing Beach lawsuit did not stipulate an amount, Murdaugh could be on the hook for millions of dollars. In addition to being forced to resign from the law firm, then admitting that he has an addiction, and then the bar suspending him indefinitely, now the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office in Hampton County, South Carolina, announced that he has been banned from volunteering at the prosecutor's office that his family has run for generations. And this is the latest twist in this tale. The insurance company has sought the federal court's judgment in favor of their denial of his claim following the accident that resulted in Mallory's death. Alex Murdaugh was allegedly misappropriating funds in the millions of dollars, and some people investigated and found that the private law firm actually received a COVID-19 bailout loan for more than $1 million to cover payroll and rent. The company was approved for the PPP loan, which stands for Paycheck Protection Program, on April 5th of 2020. The firm stated that $754,000 would go to payroll for its 68 employees, while $251,000 would be spent on rent. The loan, which was made by Palmetto State Bank, was forgiven to the tune of $1 million, which included interest accrued. Companies can qualify for loan forgiveness if they maintain their employee and compensation levels. The loan proceeds are spent on payroll and the other eligible expenses, and at least 60% of the proceeds are spent on. Now, on Thursday, September 9th, 2021, so just 3 days ago, an attorney representing the Beach Estate filed a Liz Pendens action in Hampton County Court involving Richard Alexander Murdaugh and his son, Buster Murdaugh. It is a legal filing providing notice of a pending court action, such as a lawsuit that affects title to or possession of real property, and it stated that the wrongful death suit may result in a lien on the large Colleton County home and hunting estate of the Murdaughs, and it also mentioned a property in Edisto, South Carolina, owned by the Murdaughs. The legal document listed 17 and 70 acres in Colleton and Hampton County, commonly known as the Moselle property. And this action comes after a week of notable developments for Alex Murdaugh. Now, Randolph Murdaugh IV, the eldest brother in the prominent family, said in a statement that he and the family's law firm were shocked by his brother's apparent unraveling. Quote, "I was shocked, just as the rest of my PMPED family, to learn of my brother Alex's drug addiction and stealing of money." He said, "I love my law firm family and also love Alex as my brother. While I support him in this recovery, I do not support, condone, or excuse his conduct and stealing by manipulating his most trusted relationships," unquote. And then Alex's lawyer said that Alex's gunshot, was not self-inflicted, but the accounting of Murdaugh's injuries disputes what police have said about a superficial gunshot wound and no visible injury, according to a Hampton County Sheriff's Office report. And Murdaugh's lawyer, Jim Giffrin, said the report is incorrect. Alex Murdaugh's injury in a September 4th shooting in Hampton County included an entry and exit wound, a skull fracture, and minor brain bleeding in 2 places. His lawyer said the wound was not self-inflicted. In a statement released a few days ago, a spokesperson for SLED said Murdaugh sustained a superficial gunshot wound to the head and that he called 911 at 1:34 p.m. But a report by the Hampton County Sheriff's Office released this week checked the box to where it said no to visible injuries in the shooting of Murdaugh. And the Hampton County Sheriff was contacted about these conflicting stories, and he told a reporter that it was likely a computer error. And then Alex's lawyer said, "I don't think you choose to have a flat tire or stage a flat tire to commit suicide. That makes no sense. There are many things being reported that are incongruent," unquote. Now, I don't know if I agree with him there, but he's got to defend his client. So, this whole idea that he wouldn't choose to stage a flat tire to commit suicide, yeah, I disagree with that, especially in this circumstance. I think that could definitely be a possibility. I'm just going to say it. I do think that's possible. And Griffin said there was no gun found on the side of the road, in Murdaugh's car, or in the area by SLED. Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean that he shot himself. There could be more at play here. I don't know. The story is just absolutely mind-blowing. There's so many possibilities here. I wouldn't put past anything. Like, everything's on the table. Anything's possible. Anything happened. Tons of people could be involved, including Alex Murdaugh. So, he also said that a SLED agent who was on the scene told him that the side wall of Murdaugh's tire was sliced. Okay, well, anybody could have sliced it, including Alex. Griffin said he was on the phone with Alex Murdaugh and a SLED agent on this past Monday, and the SLED agent discussed how the agency is testing the blood in Murdaugh's car, which spilled from his wound when he was retrieving his phone to call 911 after the shooting. Initially, Jim Griffin, a family friend and the attorney, told news outlets that Alex Murdaugh was driving his late wife's black Mercedes-Benz SUV when he pulled over because of a flat tire, and that a pickup truck passed by, turned around, and approached him. Then someone inside opened fire. Griffin said he spoke with Alex Murdaugh's brother, Randolph Murdaugh IV, who works for the same law firm founded by the family, and told him that his brother was able to make a phone call and continue to use his phone from his hospital bed in Charleston. Following the questions over the inconsistency, the agency said it corrected the report to specify that an injury was visible. In addition, Griffin provided further details to the Island Packet on this past Thursday, telling the newspaper that Alex Murdaugh was driving when he noticed the indicator light show he had a low tire on his car. He got out, and that's when he encountered a man in a blue pickup truck who ended up shooting at him. Griffin claims that Alex Murdaugh had gotten a good look at the shooter and that he met with sketch artists. He told the Island Packet he would meet with investigators again once he completes his first phase of detox. Now, this is an ongoing, developing murder mystery, and that's an understatement. There's now another investigation into Stephen Smith's case, an investigation into the double homicide of Paul and Maggie, an investigation into the shooting of Alex Murdaugh. There's also an ongoing investigation into the misappropriating of funds at his law firm. As developments unfold, I'll be making notes, and if any more information is released in regards to Stephen's death, or Mallory's death, or Paul, Maggie, or Alex's shootings, I'll come back with more to share, and I'll continue this series from there. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.